John Hollinger revealed some details about Gary Trent Jr. opting into his player option that may have pushed Fred VanVleet out of the Toronto Raptors. So we'll discuss the breakdown that John Hollinger said and some of the narratives that are spinning up regarding these details. Additionally, Pascal Siakam may have nuked his trade value to other teams given the fact he's an unrestricted free agent next summer and he is not willing to sign with pretty well any other roster. So the potential returns the Raptors could receive in a Pascal Siakam trade are looking bleak here at this point. Additionally, we have the real reason as to why Dennis Schroder hasn't had his introductory press conference yet, and a whole bunch more in this video. So let's dive into all the news, all the discussions. And the first thing is Gary Trent Jr. potentially pushing Fred VanVleet out of Toronto. Now, there's a couple narratives spinning up about this, which I think are a little bit crazy. We'll go into the details now, but before we do, I'm saying Gary Trent Jr., I don't think explicitly thought in the back of his head, okay, I'm going to handle my free agency in such a way that it pushes Fred VanVleet out, which is something I think too many people are running with since the Michael Grange reports that there was a divide between the vets and the younger guys in the locker room, vets being Fred, younger guys being Gary Trent Jr. That's not sort of the frame I'm sort of looking at this in, but let's basically look at what John Hollinger had to say. As he's saying, I'm wondering if one wrinkle really went wrong-footed for them, and it's Gary Trent Jr. opting into this $19 million deal. By doing so, he made matching an offer for Fred VanVleet of a max contract a tax question. Doing so would have put the Toronto Raptors $10 million over before they used a cent of their mid-level exception. That number presumes that the Raptors would have waived Thaddeus Young and not signed Dennis Schroder to replace Fred VanVleet. Filling out the roster would have also pushed that number even higher. There were hidden costs once Gary Trent Jr. opted in. Realistically, a max for Fred VanVleet would have cost them their full mid-level exception as an over-apron team. They would have been able to sign Jalen McDaniels as with the tax mid-level team, as that's the biannual exception, and they likely would have costed them in draft capital to reduce the tax hit to a more reasonable number for a middling team. A Chris Boucher salary dump or something similar wouldn't have been cheap. So basically, John Hollinger saying that, especially with all the reports saying that the Toronto Raptors wanted to bring Fred VanVleet back, that Gary Trent Jr. opting into his player option essentially made that not impossible, but extremely unlikely. And Hollinger went on to say in the article that he was surprised the Raptors didn't bite the bullet and keep Fred VanVleet, knowing he'd be a tradable asset later, because it is a big thing letting a guy that was an all-star a couple seasons ago walk, even though we've made our opinions known that we think Fred VanVleet is on a extremely high contract that I don't think would have been that tradable in future seasons. Digress on that point. You can watch all of our recent videos. You want more deep dives on that front. But Gary Trent Jr., I think, did this because, if Fred VanVleet was brought back, even not at that unrealistic number of $43 million per year, if he was in the mid-30s, there still wouldn't have been a lot of money to go around for Gary Trent Jr. in free agency. And Gary sort of has brought up that he's really comfortable in Toronto. He loves the city, he likes playing there. And even though all the reports come this year's trade deadline, indicated Gary Trent Jr. was not picking up that player option. He could get more money in open free agency. He'd want to cash in, get a longer term deal. He didn't do that. He surprised a lot of Toronto Raptors fans. Chris Haynes basically brought up how there was a lucrative extension coming for Gary Trent Jr. as well. So he is apparently going to be staying back long term. We don't have any more details in regards to that come out since day one of NBA free agency, or since all that sort of stuff's been happening. So we'll wait to see more details on that front. But basically, Gary Trent Jr., the only real way he could guarantee staying with the Toronto Raptors is by opting into that player option. And in doing so by proxy, made it a lot more difficult for the Toronto Raptors to push Fred VanVleet out. And I don't think, as some people have been running with, it's Gary Trent Jr. playing 4D chess with all the, split locker room narratives to push Fred VanVleet away. I don't think that was in the forefront of Gary Trent Jr.'s mind when he picked up his player option, but I think it's definitely something that was factored in, as he probably thought, hey, if Fred's getting this max, I don't think the team wants to be dumping salaries left, right, and center to be given, we'd have to dump it if we've brought back Fred VanVleet just to stay under that tax apron, as Hollinger brought up, is something reasonable. To add Gary Trent Jr.'s contract, whatever it would have been, in unrestricted free agency, back to that, that just seems unlikely, given the Raptors, as said, being a middling team in these sort of fronts. So if Gary wanted to stay with the Raptors, he kind of got in early with the player option opted in, gets that contract extension, stays in an organization team that he enjoys, especially sees the opportunity, the writing on the wall that, hey, if I opt in, Fred might be out. More touches for me. We can run in that direction. More shooting. The Raptors don't have a lot of shooting on this squad, so be able to get some more shots, all these types of things. Interesting play, interesting move by Gary Trent Jr. And I've seen, regardless of what narratives you want to run with, I've seen a lot of just Raptors fans praise that this happened because, if the Raptors matched a $40 million deal or something along those lines for Fred, would have been a risky move, a risky play, especially if we'd have to nuke some of our depth, which wasn't that lucrative last season. So, interesting stuff there with Gary Trent Jr. opting in. Even more interesting stuff, as obviously Pascal Siakam has been a discussion and a lot of trade rumors, reports going on as of late. Apparently, Pascal Siakam's trade value is nuked right now at this point, because if the Raptors were to trade Pascal, and I've been on the bandwagon, I've been of the opinion, I'm not trying to see one of these moves go down, especially the packages we've been hearing from the Atlanta Hawks, certainly the LA Clippers. These types of deals we've been hearing are not that intriguing to me. As a Raptors fan, all these types of things, a lot of Raptors fans tend to agree. There's not a lot of great packages. However, apparently Pascal's trade value, because reports did come out saying that Pascal wants to stay with the Toronto Raptors, wants that sort of extension, whether it's a supermax, signing this next summer, or like a lucrative max contract that he could get extended for this summer, right? He wants that from Toronto. He's happy with the city. He likes the community, giving back a lot, his oh my goodness, I can't even speak right now, but he's involved in the community. He likes being in Toronto, all these types of things. And he basically, if he's traded, he wouldn't guarantee long-term re-up of his contract. And that has really hurt his trade value. And it's been brought up that his value is not what it's supposed to be in the last year of his deal and not willing to re-sign with that squad. But basically, Bleacher Report came out and indicated his value right now is not too hot. He's saying it's difficult to know what teams will be willing to surrender for Siakam's expiring $37 million salary, especially with the risk of him walking a year from now, Hughes wrote. Rentals like that don't tend to command huge returns, but the 29-year-old two-way star is coming off the high scoring average of his career and is younger than all but one of the other big names will feature on this list, the list of potential stars that could get traded. And Siakam has to be worth at least one unprotected first-round pick, a decent young player, and salary filler. And if it softens his stance on re-signing with the new team, the price could go up significantly. So right now, with Pascal Siakam being unwilling to re-sign with another squad, one first-round pick, a decent young player, and salary filler. That's the return we can expect from Pascal. That's not too hot. That's not too hot. Now, as we learned at this year's sort of trade deadline, right, Fred VanVleet walks. We got nothing for Fred. We got nothing for a guy that was an all-star a season ago. So even though the potential offers there, like Amir Coffey, right, Terrence Mann not even being involved in any trade packages, the Bucks turning down Grayson Allen and a pick, right? Those lack of deals looked horrible at the trade deadline. I'm not mad at Masai Ujiri for declining those offers, but we ended up letting him go for nothing. So those offers would have been better than what ended up happening for the Toronto Raptors. And if there's an inclination, a leaning for Masai Ujiri that he doesn't want to bring Siakam back at all next season, then you have to look into these deals. You just have to sort of feel things out. I'm not saying do it. I'm definitely not of the opinion trading Siakam, especially where I think the roster's actually in a lot better place in terms of fit-wise, how it's sort of constructed at this point than where it was last season. But I don't know. You have to take all of that into consideration. That's all I'm saying. But let me know what you guys think about that ugly return for Pascal Siakam in a potential trade. Next thing we're taking a look at is the real reason Schroder hasn't had his press conference. Basically, we had McDaniels come out and Jalen McDaniels give his intro. Jakob Poeltl, him being re-signed, had his intro. No Gary Trent Jr. either, but we actually have details as to why Dennis Schroder hasn't been introduced to the Toronto Raptors media. And basically, Schroder's having passport issues. Not right now able to get into Canada. He's sort of figuring all that sort of stuff out. Obviously, Schroder's from Germany, so it's different than United States players coming in, and we don't have the specific details. I'm not going to pretend to be like a border security agent that knows the things that you need to sort of come up if you're an NBA player, to come into Canada, all these types of stuff. But basically, it's not something weird going on with Schroder's contract or, the cold feet from one of the sides or something like that after the Raptors moratorium. It's straight up Dennis Schroder's having passport issues. So that's the real reason he hasn't had his press conference. That should be happening soon. And the final thing we're discussing, Toronto Raptors tournament opponents revealed. So for people that don't know, there's a mid-season tournament happening this upcoming season. I've seen a lot of NBA fans just kind of be down on the idea of the in-season tournament. Personally, I'm actually really excited for it. I think it's cool for the league, especially as it builds up bit more reputation. It becomes a little bit more like something you're fighting for, something that is a resume builder, all these types of things, right? I think it could be a bit of fun. And now we have the pools in terms of who the Raptors will be competing with. Basically, the in-season tournament for the Eastern Conference groups. The Raptors will be in a group with the Boston Celtics, the Brooklyn Nets, the Chicago Bulls, and the Orlando Magic. So, I assume this is based off of last season's standings and how they're sort of split and organized, but Celtics and Nets will be some tougher competition. The Nets I'm not that afraid of, especially where their record's a bit inflated with Kyrie and Kevin Durant being on the team earlier in the season. Celtics are still great, but the Bulls and Magic I think are two teams the Raptors can handle right now, and should be fun. I'm interested to see how this in-season tournament plays out. I'm a big fan of trying different things. The play-in was a serious success for the NBA, so having more interesting basketball, especially midway through the season, I think only elevates the product for us fans. So I don't get why people are complaining about it. Should be fun just to build up some more rivalries. The Magic, the Celtics, all these types of squads. But let me know what you guys think about all this Toronto Raptors news. You guys are the best for making this far. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.